If there was one slightly cleaner patch in the filth-encrusted toilet bowl that is Disney Star Wars, then it was Andor, Tony Gilroy's prequel to the events of Rogue One. Yeah, it was a slow burn to be sure, sometimes to its detriment, and I'd be lying if I said the protagonist was the most charismatic guy I've ever followed, but after the cinematic calamities that have been visited on us in recent years, it was a refreshingly dark, intelligent, and mature take on the Star Wars universe. It made the Empire threatening again, it provided a welcome insight into the vast bureaucracy that keeps it all running. It told grounded human stories of personal sacrifice, difficult moral choices, and the thousands of tiny unmarked battles and forgotten heroes who would eventually change the fate of the entire galaxy. Most importantly, it showed that Star Wars could be more than just lightsabers and space battles and pseudo-philosophical wannabes prattling on about the Force. So I was pretty excited to delve back into the world of Andor for Season 2, which released its first block of 3 episodes a couple of days ago. And now that I've seen it, I can confidently say that, wow, this one's got off to a bit of a rocky start. Now, before I really get into this, I want to caveat my criticisms by saying that as flawed as it is, it's still miles better than almost anything else Disney have ever done with Star Wars, which I realise is a bar so low that even Peter Dinklage could vault over it with ease, but what the fuck? This is a problem very much of their own making. I'm not going to defend them for it. I've also been reliably informed that the first trio of episodes are by far the weakest of the series, and it does get better from here, so I'm not passing judgment on the whole season just yet. But the fact is that a lot of people are going to form their opinions of this show after 1 episode, never mind 3, so it was important for Andor to hit the ground running with this one, and unfortunately, it stumbles. The season kicks off in the most tonally jarring way possible, with Cassian infiltrating an Imperial base to steal a prototype TIE fighter. The only problem is that he's got no idea how to fly it, which results in a wacky chase sequence that feels like it was lifted straight out of The Force Awakens, right down to the same exact action scenes and camera angles. Not to worry though, because Cassian escapes, takes the fighter to the drop-off point, and promptly gets captured by a bunch of retards, and then spends the next 2 episodes tied up with nothing to do. This right here is what happens when the studio demands an exciting action sequence to kick off your slow-burning political thriller, and you have about a dozen other plot lines that you need to update the audience on. The only choice is to put the main character on ice for a couple of episodes while you get everything else out of the way, and it just feels as clunky and contrived as it sounds. Anyway, there's plenty of other things going on in this show, like Mon Mothma overseeing her daughter's arranged marriage to the son of a shady financier as part of a political deal to secure funding for the rebellion. Luthen dealing with a mutinous colleague who's threatening to expose their entire operation. Bix and Brasso hiding out on a remote farm planet while trying to avoid Imperial forces that are closing in. Director Krennic trying to obtain a rare mineral from an influential planet to finish construction of the Death Star. And Cyril having his mother over for dinner. Yes, that's a thing which happens in this show. Fucking hold your adrenaline in check, boys. Now, it sounds like there's a lot happening in these first 3 episodes, but it's kind of a smokescreen when you really start to think about it. There's definitely a lot of subplots boiling away here, but most of them could have easily been resolved in half the time they actually take. Like the wedding subplot, for example. The point of this storyline is to show the very personal sacrifice that someone like Mon Mothma is making to help support the rebellion, having to give up her own daughter to an arranged marriage with someone she doesn't even know. Yeah, she's not going out on frontline missions with a blaster in her hand, but she's risking just as much as everyone else. We get it, and a quick 2-minute summary of the wedding would have been more than enough to bring that point home, but instead the fucking thing is stretched out over 3 whole episodes, with all the tedious ceremonies and establishing shots that we don't need or want, culminating in a rave scene so excruciating that my spinal column had to be surgically reinserted into my body afterwards. This is just one example of many where the show stretches out stuff that isn't particularly interesting or important purely for the sake of killing time, and it just feels kinda self-indulgent in a way that the first season never was. Yeah, that one definitely had slow burning plot lines as well, and I'd be lying if I said some of them couldn't have been wrapped up a little quicker, but they were all in service of a larger story and didn't exist purely for their own sakes. Then there's that scene from episode 3. You know, the one that everyone's talking about to the exclusion of almost everything else in the show. The short version is that Bix gets cornered by an Imperial officer who takes a liking to her and knows that she's an undocumented worker on the planet, so tries to coerce her into sexual favours in exchange for turning a blind eye. And when she's not up for it, he tries to use the Force, if you catch my drift. It's a well shot, well acted scene that's suitably violent and hard hitting, and to make it clear, Bix is able to fight him off before he can actually do anything, but people are absolutely losing their shit over it anyway. And who can blame them? After all, Star Wars has always been about wholesome family entertainment. Seriously though, I don't think you can really demand a gritty and mature Star Wars show and then pitch a hissy fit when it gives you exactly what you asked for. The reality is that bad stuff like this happens in war, and just because Andor had the balls to actually show it for what it was, doesn't mean it wasn't going on throughout the galaxy already. Apparently the age rating for this show is like 14 anyway, and if you think for 1 second that your average 14-year-old is going to be even remotely shocked by something as tame as this, then bless your heart, you sweet summer childs. The bigger problem I think this show faces is the lack of engagement. Watching Andor for me is a bit like watching a game of chess where I know what the end result's going to be, and the only question is what pieces are going to get sacrificed along the way. It's definitely interesting on an intellectual level, and I can be impressed by the amount of thought and effort that clearly went into it, but for me there's no real emotional attachment to any of it. I'm not particularly rooting for any of the characters to succeed or fail because they're all a bit too sterile and detached for me to care about them on that level. And I think a problem like that is going to be very much reflected in the ratings, which were dog shit even for season 1. Much like Skeleton Crew before it, Andor is a show that would probably do great if Star Wars was a thriving brand that could afford to expand beyond its core audience and experiment a little with different genres. But after a decade of Disney fuck-ups, it isn't, and so it can't. And I suspect after the controversy of episode 3 that's divided its already small fan base, it's only going to get worse even as the show itself gets better. And that's a real shame, because as a concept, I like what Andor is and what it represents. It's having the balls to move Star Wars beyond lightsabers and Skywalkers, telling a complex and challenging story that actually requires you to pay attention for once, and setting up a world of stakes and consequences that need more than just a girl boss with a laser sword to resolve them. This is the kind of thing we need more of in Star Wars. It might have gotten off to a rocky start, but I'm going to be sticking with Andor until the end. Hopefully, I've got better news when I get to the finale. By the way, we're into the final week of our Trial by Fire Kickstarter, which means 2 things. 1, I'll soon stop pestering you with these annoying ads on my videos, and 2, this is our last chance to push hard and complete as many of our stretch goals as possible. We're already well past our initial funding goal, which is awesome, but every little donation gives us a bit more room to maneuver when the cameras start rolling. So if you've been thinking about becoming a backer but haven't quite committed yet, now might be the time to take the plunge. As always, the link is in the description and I'll leave the rest up to you. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.